Okay, good morning, afternoon, and welcome. Are we recording? Yeah, this is the eyes training class. So I actually meant to create a Vimeo series for this a few months ago, and then just life, a lot of other things, never got around to it. So I'm going to include most of the content that I had planned for that in this class, or at least a good number of it. And here's the idea is we don't really think about training our eyes, right? We kind of take them for granted that they're there and we use them all the time. But the reality is that the eyes are a series of muscles, right? There are muscles that move the eye. There are muscles that control the aperture, right? So that's the dilation and the contraction of the pupil. So it opens and closes depending on how much light there is. So there's a muscle that controls that, right? There are muscles that control the focus, the focal length, and the focal distance. So it's something that you can train. I'm not saying that some success story. I've heard of it, but I can't confirm that or guarantee it to say that, oh, if you have glasses now, you're not going to need glasses. That being said, just because you live your daily life and use your eyes doesn't mean you don't train them. And you can train them. You can train them to be better. And it's not just training. So there's kind of two phases to it. Part one is just training the muscles of the eyes themselves to get stronger, faster, find focus easier. And there's obviously a lot of benefit to that in many different things we do in our life. The part of the content that I'm not going to include in this class is kind of overall health practices just to take care of your eyes. But right, where was I going with that? Sorry, my thoughts are traveling very fast today. It's not just the muscles of the eyes getting stronger and faster and more pliable that's important, but also this idea of how we process information and be able to process information faster and differently, because the visual realm is very interesting. We don't directly interact with anything we see, right? Think about it. We see something because light that's coming from some kind of light source. Right now, it's exclusively the sun, which is however millions of miles away. And the light is hitting different objects and then bouncing off of it and hitting my eyes. And we only see a very small percentage visually. Our eyes detect, what was it, 400 to 700 nanometer wavelengths of light. That's the visual spectrum. That's very small. So even within that, there's so much complexity, and there's a whole world that we don't see, that we can't see, like cats. What are those cats? One of them is around here. They can see into the UV spectrum, right? Certain snakes can see into the infrared spectrum, like vipers that use the prey's body heat to hunt. I don't want to get into that too far because I'm not a trusted, credible source of knowledge in that anyway. But the point is, kind of a long intro, that we can train the eyes. And you should train the eyes. And even if it's just a couple minutes a day, it's something that you can do to improve a part of your body that you do use daily. And it's good also to kind of appreciate the health of your eyes, that you're able to take information about the world from something that's so far away. Anyway, let's get into it. So we're going to start just with some basic movements, just essentially basic mobility exercise like you would do for any joint. I do this as part of the morning routine. Really simple. We're just going to draw shapes and move our eyes in different directions. So I'm going to use my hands because I want to get into the hands first, and we'll get into just the eyes. So I'm going to find kind of the very edge of my peripheral vision, right? And I'm putting my hands there where if I'm looking at the camera, I can just see where my hands are. And what I'm going to do is go back and forth, looking from one hand to the other hand. Try to get a clear focus. Try to find the hand where you're looking directly at it. Push the visual range of how far you can go and see how fast also you can switch back and forth. Kind of another difference between our eyes, it's very interesting. our eyes move in the sockets, right? So if I'm looking at the camera and I move my head around, the eyes stay. The eyes are the steady cam. And then birds, for example, chickens are a good example of that, but also birds in flight. If you watch pelicans, actually, pelicans are absolutely fascinating birds. But they use their neck as amortization to keep their head steady, so their vision, because birds' eyes don't move in their sockets. So chickens, they go like this because they're looking at different things, whereas I'll talk about this later in the class, actually that's what our eyes do, is they jerk around looking at different things. And where was I going with that? Oh, birds use their necks. That's why chickens' necks are really advanced. That's why the chicken's neck is a steady cam. You can hold a chicken and move its body around, and the neck keeps the head in the same place because it's that's what connects to their visual focus. We don't have that. So anyway, back and forth, fast. How fast can you go? But try to be clear and precise. And then it's going to go at an angle about 45 degrees, up and down. Same idea. Try to get the arms at kind of the end of the vision, end range of the vision, and try to be very clear looking at one hand and then the other hand. And then same thing on the other side. Right, this is really important, this rapid eye movement, because that's how we intake information about the environment. And I remember reading, I'm going to talk about this, I think I'll have time for it later on, reading about how one of the main differences between kids and adults is that kids have a lot more of this rapid eye movement when they're awake, because they're taking in more information about their environment. And adults, it's actually one of the kind of philosophical things I talk about, difference between kids and adults. Adults think they already know. Kids are still learning, even if they don't want to learn about themselves, about their own limitations, about the world. So we're going to do the same exercise. What we're going to do is move the hands like this, and we're going to keep, so now the switching back and forth of the eyes is going to be dynamic. All right, so I'm looking back and forth from one hand to the other, but my hands are moving, so my eyes change. The idea is to go fast enough that it's like you can almost see both hands at the same time at any given time. That's actually one of my tests, right? To see how awake I am in the morning, like when I do these exercises as part of my morning routine. If I can move my eyes faster, I'm probably more well rested. My nervous system is probably not fired up. I've probably had a good recovery compared to if my eyes are a little bit slower that day. Obviously, there's other factors. So next, we're just going to draw some basic shapes with the eyes, just like we would do for any other joint. So we're going to start with a square. Try to be precise. Try to really draw this shape. And as I mentioned, so this is something I'll get into a little bit more, our eyes don't move smoothly, right? Like, I mean, in general, it's with all of our body, but like the hand, for example, it does actually jerk, but we can move it smoothly, right? The eyes don't work that way. The eyes focus on specific spots. So eye movement is pretty much always jerky, but it's like the more fast and small you can make the jerks, the more smoothly your eyes are going to move. So now we're going to do X box like this. That's the shape. And we'll go both directions. So it's, I don't know what kind of shape that is. It's like an hourglass on its side. All right, so the diagonal up, diagonal, diagonal. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to go the other direction. Bit of a brain challenge as well. It's like some of these exercises, I don't really think about eye coordination. Again, I think a lot of us take the eyes for granted because we use them all the time, but that doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't train them. Same with all your senses. right? It's not a sexy training. You're not gonna look better in the gym, but you're gonna see better. You're gonna process visual information better. So that's important, I think. We're going to draw a circle. So trying to stay on the outside of the vision, trying to make a smooth, big circle. Circle. And other direction. Right? Joint circles. Circles, and then this one is a little bit interesting. Do your best. So it's going to be a spiral. So you're going to start with an outward circle and then slowly go in and then coming out. And again, you try to make it as smooth as possible. In reality, this is how the eyes move. They jerk around. So circle, circle, spiral, spiral. You have to imagine this shape, because I don't know what my movement looks like right now. Like, I'm really trying to imagine and create this spiral. I don't know how visible it is, what I'm trying to do with that spiral. But the point is, I am actually training my eyes in many different directions. So these are good eye shape drills. Okay, so that's some basic eye movement. Next thing we're gonna do is focus pulling. So this is kind of a movie term, right? So depending on the lens and the aperture, this is, in photography, I have the term called depth of field, right? So depth of field is basically the difference in crispness versus blurriness of the object, and of the object that's in focus versus what's out of focus. And if you do, like, good portrait shots, you'll see that a lot of movies where you have the subject is very clear and then the background is blurry. So it's this idea, and the way film cameras work is really really kind of bastardized explanation, but basically the smaller the aperture is how open the iris is, how much light gets in. So the smaller the aperture, the more stuff is going to be in focus. So for example, like, again, in terms of movies, you have sitcoms that are filmed with a pretty low aperture and a lot of lights. And, you got like Seinfeld and Friends and this kind of stuff, just as an example. Everything's in focus, right? And then you have some of the more artsy stuff where you got one person out of focus, another in focus. And then you have actually somebody whose job it is on a film set to be a focus puller. They have a little circular knob, and they're responsible for those shots where it changes focus, because they don't. The AI in cameras is not good enough yet to do this to the specifications, so they still have people whose job it is to do that. So we're actually going to do that with our own lenses, and here's how it works. So find an object that's far away. Doesn't matter how far, but actually the further the better, because we want that focus to be at infinity. Where I'm facing now, I don't really have that. So I have this tree that's like, I don't know, 5-6 meters away. I have to look through the window to find it. It's not ideal. Then, what's the closest object we can find? We have the nose. The nose is always going to be blurry because the way lenses work, they have a minimal focal length, not minimal focal length, minimal focal distance. So something that's too close, you won't be able to focus on. It's a few inches for the human eyes. With cats, where are those cats? Cats are farsighted, so cats actually can't focus on anything really close to them. That's why they use their whiskers. That's why they have that face when they attack. They put their whiskers forward, because that's a sensory organ that gives them the information that they don't get at close range, right? So the first part of this exercise is we're going to switch back and forth. So you're going to look out at infinity. By the way, it's actually really good for your eyes to look at things that are far away, especially if you're spending a lot of time on phones. computer screens. Like I remember remarking when I was in Switzerland a few years ago, you know, it's very beautiful scenery, a lot of mountains and stuff. I thought like, wow, being in this country, you must have amazing eyesight because just everything is so visually stimulating. But so I'm looking out at infinity. In this case, it's about 5 yards, but it should be infinity. And I'm gonna look at my nose back and forth. And then the question, the nose, again, the nose is always blurry. But the question is, how quickly can you change? How quickly can your eyes adapt to going from very close up focus to infinity focus? And you want it to be fast, right? You have like this lens has autofocus. It's not very good. My camera that I use for my normal videos, the GH5, that's one of the weaknesses is the autofocus. So sometimes I get closer and it takes a second for it to find my face. I want that to be quick transition. Now we're going to add a little bit more to it. So we're going to add, you can use fingers, you can use whatever. Actually, marksmanship, if you shoot guns, that's kind of the way iron sights work. I'll explain that a little bit more later. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 fingers up. I'm going to do this first with both eyes open, because another exercise you can do is kind of find your dominant eye. This is also it's what you would use in shooting practice, because you would find the dominant eye and usually align the sights with that eye. But what I'm going to do is put 1 finger, 2 finger, right, like this, and I'm going to do this focus pull in 4 different spots. So it's going to go nose, 1 finger, 2nd finger, infinity. And again, the idea is find a clear focus, right? As clear a focus as possible. Like what I use for that is the fingerprints of my hand. So if I can clearly see my fingerprints, that means the object is in focus. And then I go to the next one and I try to make this transition as fast as possible. How fast does it take you to find that focus? Bah, 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 bah. Right, so that's what I'm doing. I don't know how visible it is in my eyes because they're all more or less aligned, like on the same line. You'll find that when something's close, you're going to start to see double. So that's the parallax. So what you can do is play with doing it 1 eye and then play with aligning it on the 2nd eye. So you can see the focus of the individual eyes. And for example, for me, my right eye is a little bit faster finding focus, and that is my dominant eye, that is my shooting eye. So again, it's just something that you can play with, right? 1 eye, 2nd eye. So that's the focus pulling. And of course, both. One other kind of mental exercise to play with. It's a little bit out there. You kind of have to use your imagination a bit, but you can switch dominant eyes. So typically, if I put my fingers here and I have both eyes open, to get the alignment where I have 1 finger, 2nd finger, and then infinity that I'm focusing on, all on the same line, I'm right eye dominant. So to align all of those, and then I close my left eye, yeah, it's aligned with my right eye. So when I see double of one of my fingers, how do I find the alignment to change to left eye dominant? There it is. Took a second. It took a second, but it's like this exercise of both eyes open, switching back and forth between which eye takes the dominant pieces of information. So again, just a thought. One more variation of this exercise that I'm going to do is you can use, this is something you can use like a piece of paper with stuff written on it, or like I mentioned before, you can use the fingerprints. Ideally, it should be small writing. This is one I got from Steve Maxwell, so I'll give him credit for it. And basically, this writing is a little bit too big, so I'm going to use my fingerprint. But you focus intently on this object, right? So I'm trying to make sure that I can see the fingerprints all the time, and I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it, start slow, line frame, yeah. Start slow. You're gonna look real weird in public doing this, but you tell them, fuck off. I want to be able to see well. You start slow and then you move faster. And the idea is you maintain the focus as this thing moves, right? So you try to make sure that the fingerprints that you see are always crisp and clear as you move it further away. So that everything else should be blurry or like not clear because you're really intently focusing on that finger or that writing. So it's a dynamic focal change, right? Instead of switching pa-pa, you're continuously switching. So that's another really good exercise that you can play with. Again, it's all really subtle stuff, but you don't think about it. I didn't think about it for years. I've never worn glasses either, so I've always had pretty decent vision. I've always had, 20/20 or something close to that, but I also want to maintain that. Also, I don't want to have to get glasses when I'm older. I don't know, maybe part of it is just age, but I think a lot of it is training, right? You can train every part of your body. So that's the focus pull, right? So next we're going to do a couple peripheral vision exercises. Peripheral vision, also very important. I use this a lot in my life. It's important for developing situational awareness because what happens is I can look at something, but I can still gather information from things that I'm not directly looking at. So you find kind of what's the edges of your vision, your peripheral vision. And this is the first idea is I'm looking at, it's this fence outside the window, right? You can't see that. But I'm focusing on that with my eyes, but I'm actually trying to gather information of everything else. So I'm trying to see how much can I learn about what I'm not looking at, what I'm not directly looking at. And again, this is good, like, maybe in hopefully a situation that you're not in, you're walking, maybe you got people tailing you for whatever reason. I can watch my six by looking sideways. I can see what's directly behind me right now, even though I'm just looking to the side. Obviously, I don't have a clear image of what's directly behind me, obviously, because I have to look directly at it, but I can look here and I can see what's behind me. So just an interesting thought, right? How much can you see of what you're not looking at? I use this a lot. Like, again, interestingly enough, I'm not going to get into the whole debate of mask or no mask, because that's going to be a separate topic and a separate conversation. But one gym I go to has a very strict mask requirement, right? They say mask must be worn at all times, no exceptions. This is like people do trampoline, people do acrobatics. I think it's a little bit dangerous. And I think it's dangerous because for me, I have this shit on my face. It's blocking part of my peripheral vision, and I don't like that at all. There's a gap of what I can see and what I can't. And to me, that already makes me a little bit nervous. I don't like my vision to be messed with. I use all of that. I use all my peripheral vision. So that's the first exercise, right? Look at something and how much can you see without looking at it? Like wherever you are, what can you learn about the room by focusing on one specific point and then just trying to piece together everything else? And so obviously you're not going to be able to know details, right? I can't tell you what that thing says when I'm looking here. I have to look directly at it. I'm not going to be able to read like there's a yoga block right there. I can't read what it says through my peripheral vision, but I know it's there. And now here's the second part of that exercise. This is what I call all right, so I'm going to reference this movie. It's one of the Jet Li epic movies. I think it was called Hero. It's one of his last big epic ones. And there's a very long sequence in the middle of the movie where he goes and works on a rice farm or something like that. He wants to be peaceful. He doesn't want anything to do with martial arts, whatever. That's kind of storyline. So there's one girl, and I'm not going to talk shit because it's hard, right? It's hard to play blind. It's not an easy thing as an actor to pull off if you haven't really lived it. But the way that she played blind was a little bit comical. Is basically she would just not look, anything she did, she would look away from. So it was a little bit obvious for my taste. Like now that I've been studying acting, I would like to see something a bit more subtlety in that delivery. But that being said, but this is actually the exercise. So what you're going to do is try to do something, any kind of task, but you're not going to look at it. You're not going to look directly at what you're doing. You're going to use your peripheral vision. So I'm going to pick up this yoga block. I can see where it is, but I didn't pick it up very smoothly. So now it's at the end range of my peripheral vision. There it is, right? There it is. What if I had to do a task that required a little bit more motor coordination? Like, I'm going to take this paper and I'm going to fold it. I can see it, but I'm looking at the webcam. I want the folds and creases to be accurate. Obviously, I'm using my sense of touch a lot as well, but that's also part of vision, is you use your other senses as well to create the full picture. So I folded this piece of paper, not too bad without looking at it. Obviously, it's not that hard of a task, but that's kind of the point. That's something to play with, right? You do this task, you don't look at it, but you can still see some of what you're doing, and that's up to you how far you want to go as far as technical coordination and what kind of manual dexterity that task requires. But even something simple like picking an object off the ground without seeing it, without looking at it, knowing where it is, and trying not to have to do 2 different attempts. Right, so just thoughts. Again, thoughts of stuff to work on. No right or wrong. So that's one peripheral vision test. Another one. This is, I'm going to use 2 different objects for this. You can use a tennis ball. I'm going to use juggling ball. And I'm going to use, this could be a towel. This is just like a bag. So more peripheral vision test. This idea of gathering information, visual information from something that's not directly in your line of focus. Again, really important for a lot of things. If you do martial arts, like this idea of if you have to fend off multiple attackers, situational awareness, you don't know who's coming from where, having that, not that you should get into that situation, hopefully you can avoid it and not even engage, but if it comes down to it, you want to have that awareness of, you don't know, might be fighting someone's here, someone else is coming from over there. You don't want to look because now you're open to this guy, so whatever, you do just an idea of different applications of this. Sports, I don't want to get into to sports too much, but where like elite athletes, where they look is really important, and that's actually another part of the idea, is that they don't have to look directly at what they're doing, they can look ahead, and that's one of those details that actually separates some of the elite athletes from the amateurs. Like for example, shooting. So actually I meant to say this before, the idea of the focus pulling. So when you're shooting a gun, it's probably going to have iron sights. The way iron sights typically work, they just help align your eyes so you know exactly where you're pointing. You have usually 2 prongs in the back. Then you have 1 prong in the front that goes between them, like that. And then you have your target, right? Typical iron sights, these are like pistol iron sights, right? Sometimes rifle ones are a little bit different. They have a peep, a hole, depending on the rifle. Archery also uses usually a peep that they attach to the string. So you have 2 points that you align. There's different techniques. Some people do both eyes open. Some people do one eye open. One eye is a little bit easier, but both eyes gives you more information, but there's also information that you have to shut out. So it's, but anyway, sorry, getting a little bit ahead of myself. So you have 3 points, right? You can only focus on one of them. So you have front sight, or rear sight, front sight, target. And the way, it's not the only way to shoot, this is the way that I learned, and this is the way a lot of schools teach, is you focus on the front sight. That's where you focus on. So your target is blurry, your rear sight is blurry, it's just that one notch you have in the front, but you still keep the alignment. You still make sure the target is in front of where you're looking at, and you make sure the single notch isn't in between the two prongs like that. So it's that idea of focusing on the front side to ensure an accurate shot. However, I was reading an article that like the very high level competitive shooters, or I think they tested like rookie SWAT team members versus veteran SWAT team members with a lot of experience, is that when they got better, they didn't have to look back and forth, right? The veterans who were able to make that decision faster could keep focus on their target, and they knew how to align their sights without looking back at the sights and then the target. And it saves a split second. And in that kind of situation, a split second is a lot of time. Another similar idea is they took one of the top Brazilian footballers. It was I don't remember if it was Ronaldo or Ronaldinho or I don't remember, one of these guys, one of the Brazilian guys, or Maradona maybe. No, not Maradona. I think it was Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo. So one of the top Brazilian football players, right? One of the best in the world. And they put this machine that tracked his eye movement as he was just trying to keep the ball away from somebody for 5 seconds. And what they found was that he barely even looked at the ball. So you got the ball, you can see the ball, right? You're dribbling the soccer ball, you can see it, but you don't want to look down because then you're losing information on the field. So he was able to almost never look at the ball and always look at the body of his opponent to see where he was going. Whereas they tested the same thing with an amateur football player trying to do the same thing, and they found that he was looking down at the ball a lot and looking back and forth. So it's this idea that someone who is not as advanced was not using his peripheral vision and had to focus directly on too many things, thus losing valuable time and not being efficient with the acquisition of information. So again, just thoughts, just something to think about. So the next exercise that I wanted to do is peripheral vision, and we're going to use two different objects. I use a tennis ball when I walk as well. I don't want to use it here because it's dirty because I bounce it on the floor. So this is easy level, and it's going to be like this. I'm going to pick a spot looking, and didn't do a very good job. So I'm using my peripheral vision. I'm not looking at this towel. So it's in my soft focus. So I'm going to throw it with this bag. Bag isn't the best. Towel actually works a little bit better because you got some air resistance. So it moves a little bit slower than the ball. Right? But I'm not focusing on the bag. And when I walk, I do this with a tennis ball. I bounce it. I try to look directly forward, and then I try to catch this tennis ball. Now, I did get a comment once on my Instagram from somebody who was very knowledgeable, saying that it's not a true peripheral vision exercise because you're throwing the bag and you know where it is and where it's coming from. So take it with a grain of salt. Clearly, this guy had to prove himself in my DMs. So yeah, you could have somebody else throw this. Right, that would be more realistic because then there's more unknown variables. I think it's okay if you throw it yourself. If you really want to add that unknown variable, right now there's a wind, so that gives something. Like have some kind of wind and then wait a second. So by that time, it doesn't matter if you knew where it was going or not because the air took it in an unpredictable direction. Another thing you could do is still not the same as somebody else throwing it, but you could do eyes closed and then open. So you have to Make the decision really quick, right? You don't have a lot of time. And when I'm right now, I am looking directly at the bag, right? But I could do the same thing looking at the webcam. That one went completely out of my vision. All right, so the idea is I look directly at the webcam. I give it a second. I throw it, but I give it a second because I don't know where it's gonna go. And then I just have to make a very quick visual. I have to find the information or gather the information about where it is and then make a really quick decision on catching it. So solid object, this is a juggling ball. It's actually a chainmail juggling ball. It's pretty cool, so I can do the same thing. Juggling is actually a really good visual coordination exercise because you can't look. I can do very basic juggling. I'm not an expert by any means, but it's this idea that I'm not really ever looking directly at these balls where they're going, but I do see them the whole time. There's a rhythm. There is a coordination, but I'm tracking multiple targets at once, and I have to adjust, right, what's happening with my throws and my catches. So that's also, juggling is really, really good visual coordination exercise. But look, same idea, right, throw, eyes closed. This one I am looking directly at it. So I'm trying to catch it as fast as possible, given the information. Again, obviously, like I said, somebody else throwing it is going to be a bigger challenge because even though I can't see it, I do know the general direction that I'm throwing it. That being said, that doesn't mean I'm going to discount this exercise completely. So what if you got no one to throw balls to you, all right? It's hard. It's hard to find good ball throwers these days. Okay, we're going to do one more exercise, and then I'm going to call this class. So this is the learning how to appreciate the information that you get and hold on to it. So here's the idea. Basic idea is you're going to look at something and you're going to close your eyes and you're going to try to find it. All right. So for example, I'm going to try to grab the tripod of the webcam. I see where it is. Okay, it's about 3 feet away from me. I'm going to close my eyes and then see how close I can be. So I was off. I grabbed one of the legs, but I grabbed the wrong leg. So let's try again. I'm going to go from standing this time a little bit further. That's about 6 feet away from me. So close my eyes. 2, 3 steps. No, I was way off. So again, it's just a game, and you can do this, you know, a number of different things. Like I got these 3 juggling balls, right? So I'm going to see where they are. And I'm going to try to pick them up. So look at where these balls are. I'm going to close my eyes. And I'm going to see if I can find, there's one, first one, pretty good. I know the second one is slightly to the right, and the third one is about in the same line, right? So it's a challenge to appreciate not being able to see things all the time. So it's kind of a good memory game to play. But it's, again, it makes you more efficient at gathering information that comes from the visual medium. So that's it. That's all I got. I have more, but we hit time limit. So that's today's class, exercise for the eyes. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. And now I'm going to end the recording.